Okay, I'll show you how to adjust this faceplate here. This is the knife edge down here that separates the tape from the backer. When it comes down, the tape tends to continue on and the backer rolls up around and gets taken up by the spool. These two socket head cap screws are what hold this unit on right here. We don't have anything holding it on this side because we needed access to load the tape. So we have to adjust it and set it up and kind of put a little bit of tension on these, and would really like to not ever have to loosen this, but sometimes we have to make an adjustment. So if you just take a 3/16 Allen wrench and you loosen these two, that whole thing will just drop straight down and you won't have a clue where you started. So you want some kind of a registry as to where you started, which an old checkbook will come in handy, because you can take about that much, I'm not sure how much, but you have to take the tape off to get down here, and then you take whatever thickness you think you might need and you poke it in between, right in here. There's a slot right in there, and you can just stick it in there and use it as a big long 6-inch shim. And if you think you got it kind of in the right spot and you got the right thickness and you want to move it up or down, this gives you a good reference point. So we cut the tape off, we figure out where this fits nice in there, and then I loosen these, and you will see it drop right down because there's nothing holding it on there. There's no pins or anything. It just floats, and then it's tightened accordingly over here. If you want to move it up, you take out whatever you think you might want to move it up. Paper is about 3/4 thousandths thick, and you can do the math. It's about 3/4 thousandths. And if you want to move it up 40, you got to take 10 sheets. I'm not sure how much. It's kind of a trial and error deal. But you move it up, you stick that in there, and there's your shim. Then you can take this and slide it straight up and tighten these back down, and now you've got this knife edge. It still has to be horizontal, parallel to everything around there, or you're going to have issues with it moving right or left. We've had issues a couple of times where two pieces of tape have come through, and usually it's because this has been moved, but maybe it's dropped down. It shouldn't really drop down, but it could have gotten moved, or maybe it's the sensor was set too close to the edge of comfort level with the tolerance, and so it's kind of barely hanging on. But how this works is you got your sensor that comes around the back, and it determines whether you're light or dark, and it stops accordingly with that 1/4 inch space in between. If the faceplate is too far down and your tape is set in the right spot, that means that the leading edge of your tape is stuck onto the backer with more adhesive, and it's going to be harder to pull it off. So when you go in to put your stock in there, it's going to kind of tear or try to pull. It's going to want to hang on harder than if it's just barely hanging on. There's a fine line between having it hanging on by a thread, because you can set this you can adjust it up to the point where it'll just drop right off. So you want it set in a way that it sticks on there and it stays for the next piece of stock going through, the next pad going in there, but you don't want it dropping off, and you don't want it stuck on there too tight. If it's stuck on too tight, what happens is we push this in, and then behind here where it's coming, where your staged up pieces are on the roll, it's going to want to continue to pull that. It pulls on the backer and it starts to pull more through. If the sensor is set loosely, I don't know exactly how to say it, but if it's set right on the edge and it hits that piece of tape again, if it pulls far enough to hit that piece of tape, it doesn't know where it's at, and it thinks, well, it's time to index another piece of tape. So you use this one, you come back out, and then it indexes another one, or it indexes 2. And we don't really want that to happen. So these are set up, and they shouldn't have to be moved, but in the event they do, for the most part, this usually has to come up because it's too far down and it's hanging onto the piece of tape, or you've got a new roll on there and it's got a little bit more adhesive on it or something. Sometimes it's the product that's the problem, but that's how you set this and give yourself a reference point. It's a pretty good way using a book of checks. First find it before you loosen these two, because if you do loosen them, you're just lost. You're kind of like starting from square one. So do that. Either add paper to it or take paper off, pull that up, tighten them back up, and give them a pretty good snug tight fit on here. They're helicoiled in there, so it'd be tough to strip them unless you really leaned on it, but that's how we can adjust the faceplate. Try not to, but if you have to, that'll work.